What you just saw happened at a UKIP rally on Saturday the 8th of November 2025. 7 people were arrested and many more were assaulted or injured. Still, many people turned up to protest, and many more people turned up to counter-protest. UKIP creates the narrative that we live in a time of great political turmoil, with the country viciously divided between left and right, friend and foe, British and outsiders. For them, the only right course is resistance and action. But when I attended the UKIP march, most of the people I saw seemed very normal. What they were saying, however, was far from it. This is what I saw.
We're taking our country back, and as our enemies will show us no diplomacy and no surrender.
UKIP was founded in 1993 with the singular goal of taking the UK out of the European Union. It's never had any MPs, but has had some members of the European Parliament, most notably Big Nige. Undoubtedly though, the biggest jewel in UKIP's crown was when the UK pulled out of the EU in 2016. David Cameron's gamble to silence Eurosceptics in his party backfired, and off we went. In reality, it feels like nothing much is very different. Except, of course, we now have a blue passport.
Blue passport.
Life goes on, and after their eponymous victory, support for UKIP faded. That is until now. It seems that a nasty revival of the party is occurring, championed by Nick Tenconi, a man who gives Mr. Clean a run for his money. Tenconi stands on a platform of stoic masculinity and anti-immigration policy. When he isn't waxing his head, he spends his spare time harassing migrants in France. He says that the country needs to fight back against the violent left-wing Islamo-fascists. But UKIP represents ordinary people, right? They're just normal people angry at the failures of the elite politicians. Well, it's not quite so simple. In order to understand why people support UKIP, we need to really look at who turned up for the march. The first person I spoke to was a young man who worked in a warehouse. After spotting my camera, he asked me what my views were on the issues of the day, and I responded that it didn't really matter, since I was there to cover it. He then complained about people wearing masks and of being called a fascist. Now, this seems a little ironic when Nick Tenconi himself complains about Islamo-fascists.
We didn't bother with voting. We left it to the multi-millionaires. And whilst we left it to traitors, to the godless, to the snakes, to the liars and the deceivers, left-wing fascists and Islamo-fascists, they saw an opportunity. They saw an opportunity to seize power.
Unfortunately, I didn't get an interview with this guy, but he seemed quite hung up on this fact. I understand it. I mean, who would want to be called a fascist? Completely unrelated, but here is Nick Tenconi doing a gesture that definitely isn't a Nazi salute. The concept of a dog whistle refers to something which hints at a certain idea or ideology, but maintains plausible deniability. In this way, those in the know, and those who aren't carry on blissfully unaware. One of the most offensive things I heard all day was the music at the UKIP supporters rally. Further lack of taste was demonstrated by this guy wearing a Christmas jumper in November. Despite being told that they should gather elsewhere, several UKIP supporters attended the counter-protest. They did this by saying that they were journalists, which is problematic in itself. But if they're there supporting UKIP, then they are UKIP supporters.
Do you just want to look at what you feel like and the instincts from the rhetoric?
Anyway, this nondescript, rotund, grotesque being here is trying to stop the video.
We promoted sodomy! We promoted homosexuality! We promoted all the evil!
One such fellow was saying a lot about how Eritrean people are responsible for sexual violence in the UK.
Eritrea are the ones that are releasing all of their worst criminals in regards to sexual assaults, knife assaults, violent assaults. They have already...
It's just a bit of fear-mongering, isn't it?
I get
the white
that.
population in Britain, there's more sex offenders that are white British than any other race.
I understand that, but when
So
you apply
the fear-
proportionality per capita, it goes heavily in the other side.
I think you'll find that another offence. Fake.
That's
I don't really know why he chose this specific country, as Eritrea is relatively small, and also relatively developed. It was telling that he focused so much specifically on this nation of only around 3.5 million people. No prizes for guessing why. Now, many people I met that day talked about sexual violence as the major motivator in their dislike of immigration. They like to throw up statistics pulled from God knows where about it. And out of context, statistics show us very little. For example, ethnic minority groups are stopped at a higher rate by police in the UK, suggesting that they're more often racially profiled. So the issue with this argument is this. Either you think that race informs a person's propensity for crime, in which case you are a racist, or you think that race is merely an unrelated and coincidental factor, in which case it's irrelevant. In these arguments, it's very hard to ignore the fact that they only seem to talk about people from the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa. This argument is where we see what the terminology used really means. There was no mention of people from predominantly white European countries. Immigrants to them are hordes of people in small boats. Literature has shown that terms like migrant are used as a dog whistle for non-white people. This way, people can complain about migrants whilst deflecting any allegations of racism. For context, between March 2022 and June 2023, there were 179,500 Ukrainian refugees who had entered the UK under the resettlement scheme, compared to only 29,000 Afghanistani refugees under a similar scheme. Now, any sensible person knows that in reality, social inequalities, underreporting, institutional racism, and a host of other factors contribute to these crime disparities. There is also an epidemic of violence by men against women. In 2023, only 1.2% of rape or sexual assault charges were made against women. But we don't say that we should deport or lock up all men, because we know that men aren't inherently more likely to commit crime. So the reason it's so hard to argue or engage with UKIP supporters about this is that they have a pretty catch-all defence. Why take the risk? Most of them will probably say that there are many benefits to immigration, and that they personally know several good immigrants. But to them, if there's violent people coming over through these methods, why take the risk? If we have the means to stop them, why wouldn't we? For them, not doing so is immoral, even if there is collateral damage.
I totally understand what you're saying. I understand that there's British people that commit rapes, there's British people that have got knife crimes, but at the same time we shouldn't be adding to the problem.
One thing that UKIP supporters love more than wearing poppies and putting up flags is being an independent journalist. I spoke to one such character, who I first met at the counter-protest, before later seeing him supporting UKIP. He complained to me about left-wing intolerance and violence.
I'm here as an independent journalist. They talk about unity and being nice, but everything that they do is about division. Yeah, whenever the left-wingers do a protest on their own, there's never a counter-protest. It's very rare. If that lot were allowed to go down and actually meet up and confront the UKIP march, that would have been really dangerous.
The unawareness of this statement wasn't lost on me. Now, it's also not true to say that the counter-protesters would harass UKIP members, but that the same wouldn't happen the other way around. This clip shows two girls who, bravely or foolishly, went to the UKIP protest, but were quickly surrounded and chased off. It would have also captured some of the misogynistic and offensive things that people were shouting at them had I remembered to turn on my microphone. I'll let you use your imagination there. It's probably also worth noting that the counter-protest wasn't just left-wing people. Despite what some claim, there were apolitical Quakers, Christians, and random members of the public who were just passing by. There also didn't seem to be any independent journalists joining in with the chants. The same can't be said about the UKIP protest. So this rhetoric of the violent left posing a threat to free thinkers on the right was something that I heard a lot of at the UKIP march. Most people on both sides were quick to disavow violence as something beneath them. But a lot of people still seemed pretty keen to get stuck in. When things kicked off, there weren't many people holding back. So why do people say one thing about violence and act another way? If you ask your dad what he thinks about Charlie Kirk getting shot, he'll probably say it was a bad thing, and that violence isn't okay. But if you ask him what he thinks about Benito Mussolini getting strung up like an Iberian ham hock, he'll hopefully say something like it was a necessary evil. Already then, we've exposed the contradiction in political violence. Anyone respectable in the public image will universally condemn violence, but anyone respectable in the public image will also say that there are certain scenarios where violence might be required. So the principle that violence is always bad is possibly true, but it's incompatible with the idea that violence is sometimes necessary. Often the most necessary changes come through violence. The Haitian Revolution, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the suffragettes, the list goes on. Now, whilst Mussolini was killing thousands of innocent people, Nick Tenconi is just saying some pretty horrible things about immigrants. They're not on the same level, of course, but it's wrong to think that speech wouldn't lead to action if it were not resisted.
Liars and deceivers. I'm running out of patience with these people. Protecting and platforming communists is one of the most heinous of crimes. The police are giving them airtime. I mean, why are they even allowed at street level? The church excommunicated not just Nazis, but communists. You're not receiving communion, you're a I know, I've seen the social media profile. These people are left-wing extremists. They are a mixture of communists and Islamo-fascists, and they're going home.
Your march, peaceful, successful, superb, no issues from the police.
But you've basically got mob rule. We saw it in Whitechapel with Islamist no-go zones, and we're now seeing it, we've been seeing it for ages, so it's kind of a non-topic. We're taking our country back, and we don't just want the Islamo-fascists gone, we don't just want the invaders gone, we don't just want the foreign parasites gone claiming welfare who are on visas. Open border policy, we want to take our country back and we want to re-enshrine our sovereign borders. We want the communists gone as well. These people, communists, Marxists, socialists, the radical trans lobby, they want total equity. It's communism.
These are English people, heritage English people, and they're nuts.
Yeah.
They have forgotten the face of their fathers.
Yeah.
So, what would be the plan?
Day one, stop the rot. Day one, close the borders. Day one, deploy the military into the Navy. Not one more invader gets to cross. Day one, obviously launch the military into Britain. These are armed, in uniforms, rifle-carrying men serving at His Majesty's pleasure under orders to detain the illegals, the communists, the far-left extremists, the Islamo-fascists. And what you'll see is there'll be a mass exodus from Britain. They'll run. And because we have contrition and kindness in our heart, we will let them leave. Unless, of course, they're wanted or a criminal, we will let them leave. Because this isn't about anger, it's about justice. Where we came from, morals, codes, ethics, values, purpose, everything. It either comes from the one true faith or it doesn't. Tolerance, bending over, being so kind, so that you could feel morally superior by demonizing your brother. I'm not a Nazi, you're a Nazi. I'm not a racist, you're a racist. We're talking about narcissism on steroids. That's why we're going to reinstate Christianity back into the heart of government. We give men a purpose. A man without a purpose is useless, and he's headed for depression and anxiety. And so what do we see in New York? You've seen the stats about who voted for that little Islamo-fascist. Now I call this out, I'm risking getting called a misogynist, but we need to have the conversation about angry, violent, weird women who pander to communism and Islamism. Men, typically, who fall for happy wife, happy life, when they see that monster, they're going to go, oh, what have I done? Stoicism and masculinity is going to come straight back on the menu for us. It's going to be glorious.
Free assembly and free organisation unfortunately allows hate to be disseminated. It's why police work to crack down on terror networks, and ultimately, it's why you have to challenge ideas before they're enacted. We've seen how resistance works throughout history, even in Britain. The Battle of Cable Street in 1936 showed that ordinary people can resist fascism through action rather than ideology. There are, of course, similarities between Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists and today's UKIP. A quick leaf of Mosley's 1932 The Greater Britain shows us many things they both focus on: power, might, restoring greatness, economic prosperity, and the racial unity of the British people. I'm sure that Tenconi wouldn't say he's a fascist, but sometimes you've got to call a spade a spade. So, we accept that standing up against destructive ideologies and actions is sometimes required. This leaves us with a tricky problem. Where do we draw the line? This brings us to what Karl Popper calls the paradox of tolerance. That is, in order to protect free speech, we must in fact limit speech. The argument goes like this. If we have a society that welcomes literally all views, no matter how hateful or bigoted, we risk letting the devil in through the front door. In this society, we would allow people who want to take away our free speech. We would allow in Nazis and fascists who want immigrants and dissidents dead. In other words, we'd have to tolerate people who did not tolerate us. The solution for Popper is that we should not tolerate anyone who advocates using violence rather than speech. Now don't get me wrong, this is an argument that could also be levelled by the UKIP lot against communists if they got their act into gear. It's not something I've ever heard used by UKIP, and I didn't see any copies of Popper's works at the rally. Popper wasn't partisan in his argument and believed that we should extend intolerance to anyone who reverted to violence rather than using rationality to advance their views. Popper proposed the concept in the direct aftermath of Nazism. It was at a time where Europe was looking for ways to guarantee that it never happened again. The solution he came up with here might seem uncomfortable, but it's always worth remembering that the Second World War was won on the battlefield, not in the free marketplace of ideas. So when we're deciding whether as a society we should tolerate speech or not, we must weigh things up. On one side, you have the right to free speech that whoever is espousing the views has. On the other, you have the right for the rest of society to live peacefully, to have their own voices heard, and to participate democratically. So wherever you draw the line, someone is having their freedom curtailed. But at a certain point, where the voice of a violent few drowns out the voice of a peaceful majority, speech and freedom must be restricted. So let's look only at what I heard the other day.
To the traitors, to the godless, to the snakes, to the liars and the deceivers.
We want the communists gone as well.
Talk about unity and being nice, but everything that they do is about division.
I think the only way people can learn is the hard way, unfortunately. That's what history tells us.
Okay.
So I don't think that people will understand our point until they actually experience it, but then it will be too late.
So. We've just had enough in this city. We're just letting anyone.
Off our streets, lefty scum! All Muslims are heretics. All of their families who have first cousin marriages should be deported from this country. All of the Muslims who have more than one wife, all the whole family should be deported from this country.
Don't be fooled into thinking that what Mr. Tenconi and his band of bruisers are saying is just rhetoric. He wants the forceful removal of immigrants and opponents. UKIP isn't just a band of edgy, misogynistic teenagers. They're a group who hate immigrants and anyone they deem communist. They seek their deportation through force and the establishment of a Christian ethno-state. He might parade under the guise of mercy and unity, but Tenconi seeks to use force to achieve these goals. One woman I spoke to talked about it in terms of revenge. The left doesn't tolerate them, so why would they tolerate the left? We've reached a point of no return. The divide is too deep, there's no reasoning with terrorists. Tenconi himself talked about the need to deport communists, or at the very least run them out of the country. What a kind heart he has. This approach doesn't seem to be conducive to popular support or fostering national unity. And it's only when you realise that this isn't his aim that you can understand UKIP's tactics. Whilst Tenconi has his heart set on Downing Street, he must know that this will never happen. UKIP's in disrepair, comprised mostly of opportunistic Charlie Kirk wannabes who see an opportunity amongst the chaos. Tenconi only joined recently and he's already in charge. Before that he was a relative nobody. What's more, right-wing support in the UK is now fractured between at least 3 anti-immigrant parties, with Reform leading the charge. Ideological division, a problem traditionally championed by those on the left with self-inflicted gun wounds in their feet, has shifted to the right. And this has all left UKIP looking like little more than an extremist sect. It advocates intolerance against its opponents and frames them as communists. And given that most communists I've met are scrawny university students, I don't really think they're a major threat. Of course, I am not the arbiter of who can say what. It's not up to me to say that UKIP needs to be stopped. That's the government's job. All I'm saying is that it's worth remembering that language and violence go hand in hand. The counter-protest was split between those who believed in the right for UKIP to express their concerns peacefully and those who believed that they must be resisted. Now, it was a very tricky discussion to be had, and one that thankfully wasn't really put to the test. The tension of the day made things harder to talk about, but in the end there were relatively few clashes. Either way, both sides knew that had the police not been there, things could have been a lot worse. So, if you accept Popper's argument, which anyone who fought in World War II probably would, then you have to draw a line somewhere on free speech. We already don't allow death threats and advocation of violence under the law, and a lot of what I heard at the UKIP march probably would have led to an arrest if it was said online rather than in a police-protected mob. UKIP wants to be seen as a group of ordinary people. They want you to think that they're just normal concerned citizens who are fighting for what is right. That is how they buy legitimacy. But what they say isn't normal, and thinking that it's normal lends further credence to their views. I'm not trying to suggest any solution here. I don't know whether the threshold for intolerance has been reached. I don't know whether UKIP supporters can be brought back into the folds of conventional society. I don't even really know how they feel. What I do know is that entrenchment is rarely the practical answer to division. Whilst leaders like Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi benefited from taking a hard line, people like MLK were equally successful with opposite tactics. So whatever you think the solution is, the best way to change something is to start doing something.